Welcome to the Honest Designer Show.
Welcome to the Honest Designer Show, your transparent look into life as a modern designer. My name's Tom Ross and I'm the founder at designcuts.com, and this week I'm joined by my fellow Brit and hand lettering expert Ian Barnard and the incredibly talented South African illustrator Lisa Glanz. This week we're talking all about how to hone in on your natural talents and how to realise when you might just suck at something. Practice can make perfect, but it definitely helps to build self-awareness and focus on what comes most naturally. And that's exactly what we dig into in today's episode. So without further ado, let's get into the show. This week we're talking about how to know if you suck. Right?
Putting it mildly.
Sounds a bit aggressive when you say it like that. I should point out, unfortunately, we're missing Dustin again. He had an urgent appointment he couldn't get out of. He's fine. He'll be back next week. But he's starting to get the part-time title, closely followed by Ian, I think.
What?
Between the four of us, I'm marking a little sort of black spot in the calendar each week.
I always give him my form for allocated time off the show.
No, it's true, actually. No, your mum popped it round, so that was very kind of her.
Yeah. When do we get gold stars?
Well, not if you suck up like that, Lisa. Okay.
Oh, damn.
So I want never got. So yeah, this week we're talking about, I guess, self-awareness. So it's not just how to know if you suck, it's how to know if you're great as well. Mm-hmm. And Ian brought this topic to the table. And Ian, I guess you were really saying some things you will never be the best at, other things you'll naturally be good at. I guess what we're talking about here is talent, right? Because on the show, we always kind of say, well, practice makes perfect. Pretty much anyone can learn design, anyone can be creative. And I think that is true to an extent, but some people are inherently more talented than others. There's people none of us will ever reach, probably, even if we practice every minute of the day. And that's fine.
I think it's like there's some things that are like the two sides of a magnet, you know, north and south, and you try and push, however hard you push them together, they're always going to repel. And I was just thinking about how there's some things in my creative areas that are a bit like that, where I constantly like try and push them together, try and make them work, but they don't, however hard I push. And I was just thinking about why is that? Why is there some things that I just can't get hold of and do, no matter how hard I practice, where there's some things that I naturally feel that come easy to me. I don't have to think very hard. Because I know it's like driving a car, you know, you learn the steps of getting there and you feel quite overwhelmed, but once you put that learned practice into time, you eventually clicks and you get it and you can drive. But there are people that are a lot better drivers, go off to do, you know, Formula One, but there are some who can never get out of that stage of just being good enough.
Yeah.
And I suppose to be able to be an F1 driver, you have to be self-aware that you have got that gift to be able, or the gifted talents that enable you to get to that point. And
so I guess what you're saying is pretty much anyone can learn to drive, but there's only one Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
Or one Michael Schumacher. But
I'm not saying that we're aspiring to be the F1 drivers of the creative world. It's just this is more like an open conversation of how do we learn self-awareness, I suppose, so that we put in our time and our effort into the right places. Because you could be putting in loads of practice
and never
really see any fruit from it.
Tree. Yeah.
Do you think it's to do with the path of least resistance? because I grapple with this concept, right? Because a lot of it is not that easy when you're in the formative stages, and it can be tough going. You have to practice really hard, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, that old theory of like the path of least resistance kind of works here, where it's like if it feels like pushing a boulder up a hill constantly, maybe it's not the thing for you. But if it comes a little bit more naturally, maybe it is.
Yeah, and there's some things that do feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill until you get it. I'm just thinking of other things like juggling. You yeah, you don't think you're going to get it. Your brain just can't compute all juggling. It's those three, trying to juggle 3 balls. Your brain just can't compute it, and then it does, and then you understand, and then you can do it. And but it takes a long period of time to get there. And I suppose
I guess it's, what, this is like it's a weird sort of situation in a way, because on the one hand, even if you are enjoying the pursuit of this so-called greatness, and you suck and you never seem to be getting anywhere, but you're still so committed because you have this deep passion for it, then isn't that an achievement in itself? Because I would generally say that people give up if they know that it's just too difficult and not getting anywhere. I mean, that's often what stops people from really pursuing anything that's, a little bit out of their comfort zone. So it's like a weird kind of situation, because if somebody is willing to pursue something out of their comfort zone, they're not really good at it, and they keep doing it forever and they never really get good at it, but they have this like serious passion for it, and they show up every day and they go for it. I still think that's okay.
Yeah, that's great, as long as they're not thinking, I'm so frustrated that I'm not one of the world's best. That's unfair.
Exactly. I think that's maybe where it gets a bit weird, because then you need to accept I guess, where you are. You can't try and push yourself into a hole when you're not that shape, kind of thing. Then rather,
Sorry.
I know that sounded terrible, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I nearly kept a straight face.
Yeah, it's tricky, but I guess I think maybe you can take one step further and say, okay, so you're not good at it. And if you're wanting to make a career out of it and you're hoping to be good at it because you want to sign, I don't know, some really good deals with licensing agents, or get really good, I don't know, clients from your design work, then maybe you need to get realistic and think, well, you're going to have limitations in that department, and maybe move elsewhere, like shift your creativity flow somewhere else. But if you're doing it just to still enjoy it, then that's okay, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I guess it's quite a tough question, because it comes down to self-awareness. But when I think of some of the stuff that I'm the best at, not out of anyone, I mean that out of my things that I do that I'm best at,
yeah.
Then it is stuff that took me a long time. So it isn't that it naturally just came to me and suddenly I was nailing it. Like web design took, I don't know, over 10 years of constantly working on it and improving until I'd say I got to any kind of respectable level. And then I've learned a lot more being around our creative director Matt now, and so it's constantly moving. So do you see what I mean? There's a kind of tension between the two, because I guarantee someone listening to the show is going to say, well, that's all well and good, but I'm doing X right now, graphic design, web design, illustration, drawing, whatever it might be. I'm doing X, and how do I know if I suck at it, if I'm maybe just mediocre at it? How do I know where my ceiling is, and how do I know if I should abandon it and try something else, or if actually this is the thing I'm meant to be doing and I'm just on the learning curve, and that's why it seems so hard?
Well, I always think that testing the waters, if you have the stomach for it, is to, if you're a graphic designer, start pitching big clients. If you're an illustrator, approach agencies. If you, if basically let the market or the audience or the public tell you where you're at, basically.
And they will, because they're not your family. They're not going to take pity. They're not going to say, that looks great. It's like, I'm not giving you my money for that.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah, if someone's going to pay you for the service, they're going to hire you based on what they see. So if you're not good enough, they're just not going to hire you. So that's one way to figure out, where you're at.
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
I don't think I've mentioned it on the show, but something that we do here, a lot of businesses do, is you think about market rate,
Mm-hmm.
which essentially is what the market tells you you're worth in terms of the job you do, the type of work you do, how good you are, what people are willing to pay, all that kind of stuff. That defines your rate. So that will say you can get clients of this size. You're currently worth $10 an hour or $100 an hour or $1,000 an hour. That all essentially comes down to your market rate. And whilst that's not the only thing that's going to tell you how good you are, it can be a good barometer.
Yeah, it is. I mean, all these things we're saying are not necessarily the only thing, or they're not the Bible, so to speak, on how to determine whether you're good enough. But they're, as you said, they're kind of barometers that you can use. That's also not.
Sorry, I want to be devil's advocate here, because I'm practically hearing a lot of my followers on Instagram commenting back to this if I made the point, and they'd be saying, oh, well, I guess it means I suck and I should give up, because right now pretty much no one's paying me for my work.
Well, no, but that doesn't necessarily. The first thing I would ask was, like, when last did you cold call? When last did you pitch? When last did you put yourself out of your comfort zone and actually approach somebody and say, hey, this is my portfolio. Do you want to, hire me or whatever? So I would ask all those questions, because 9 times out of 10 people haven't done that, and I understand why. It's not easy. It's terrible, actually.
What about as well J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter? Sorry, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, Lisa.
Go for it.
I'm grilling you. So Harry Potter, I believe it was got rejected by 35 publishers and accepted by the 36th, something like that. If she had have stopped at 35, she would have said, well, my market rate is nothing. I'm not any good. But on 36, it practically changed the world and became this, hundreds of millions of dollars franchise and all the rest of it. So nothing actually changed in the quality of her work. And that therein lies the danger of relying entirely on market rate to determine how good you are.
But are you sure nothing changed in the quality of her work?
I don't think it did. I think it was literally the same book that was getting rejected,
really?
And finally it got picked up. Yeah.
Because if I just I'm not saying it's changed or whatever. I don't know the history of it, but I'm just saying that often what happens is when you pitch or you try, you're hurt by the rejection, but once you gather yourself, you might look at it and go, okay, hang on, maybe this is missing, or maybe I need to rework that, and then that actually helps you shape your work better and analyze your work. It kind of gives you that extra bit of boost to actually go, okay, let's step back, have a look at it. How good is this? How bad is that? Where do I compare? Maybe they had a point, maybe they didn't. That process is brilliant. But if she literally just went from publisher to publisher and 36th one accepted her, I'd also have to say that a lot of writers will go, well, welcome to the publishing world, because I think it's also really difficult to get published.
It's hard to know whether they rejected her because it was bad quality or it wasn't right for their intended audience was. It's like, for instance, the Beatles getting turned down by the first manager, or was it because it was a different sound and it was like, actually, I don't want to invest in this, rather than it being bad music, which it wasn't, because it was the Beatles. So, like Tom mentioned earlier, as we were prepping for this, about the people that go on.
Lisa mentioned.
Lisa mentioned America's Got Talent, or whatever it is, the X Factor. Those people who think they're amazing, yet when everyone hears them, they're like, "Oh, that's terrible," and they can't stop laughing. How do you gauge, without like the market stuff, whether you are good or not? How it's a tricky.
Definitely takes a self-analytical look, brain or attitude or whatever, because I wonder if we can look at those people on these shows that we're talking about as an example. I wonder if those people have actually done a fair amount of recording of themselves and played it back with a critical ear.
Yeah.
I do wonder, because it's pretty obvious sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or are they just going on the fact that their mom loves their voice and their dad thinks they're the best things in sliced bread? I don't know. It's really tricky.
I think unless you're in the rarity, like those people who are there for airtime and they're delusional,
Yeah.
I think most of us have more self-awareness than we might admit. I think it's the trendy thing for creatives to be self-deprecating and negative. And I think either they do it out of a kind of false modesty, or more often than not, I think they do it for attention, or I know I certainly have, where like I'd be in art class at school and my reaction would always be like, someone's like, oh, that's really good. And I'd be like, oh, no, it sucks. Like, look at that. Oh, it's really, really bad. It's like, isn't it bad? And more people would be like, no, it's not bad. It's really good. And you'd sort of do it to almost get that positive feedback. I know that's really insecure.
That's psychotic, Tom.
Well, not
not
in a conscious way.
No. I'm just ragging you.
Yeah, but it sucks. Like, it's so stupid. But
Yeah.
every creative I've ever known does that, and it's really frustrating. And eventually, I got fed up with it. I'd have musician friends or photographer friends. They do this amazing thing. Oh no, it sucks. And I wasn't going to sit there and indulge them and be like, no, you trust me, it's great.
No, really,
like, believe in
it's
yourself.
good,
I'm
yeah.
like, fine, it sucks then, if you want to say that. But I think deep down we know if it's any good or not. I was in that art class. I knew I could draw better than your average person, but I knew I wasn't incredible and like as good as our teacher. I pretty much knew where it was, and all that other fluff was just like insecurities or emotional stuff attached to it.
We have blinkers on because we're so close to ourselves and in the situation we're in that we don't see the realisticness. My own words, yeah.
I guess my argument is I think we do more than we let ourselves believe. I think like the four of us on this show have developed enough self-awareness to kind of know, and none of us are jumping on here. At least you're not like, oh, this latest illustration is so bad, like please tell me otherwise. Like, we're kind of past that phase.
Yeah,
we know how good it is. Like I know I did it a bit the other day, right? I drew that eye on my Instagram and you were like, it's good, and I was like, oh no, it's not. It kind of stuff. Like, I know it's okay, it's an okay eye, like it's perfectly decent. I don't draw very often. I was pretty happy with it, but it's not amazing. It's not like a proper, artist who draws all the time. It's definitely not that good, and I'm totally cool with that. But I know it doesn't actually suck either.
Yes, exactly.
And I think people need to find that realism.
Yeah, and it's as Ian said, sometimes it's quite difficult if you actually don't know how to do that. I mean, I think I guess what it boils down to is that whole thing of I'm just comparing it to those really heated family discussions that you have. Either it's about, I don't know, some family event that happened in the past, or it's political views, or it's something, and it always ends up like you can't understand why is this person not seeing your side, or can't you see what I mean? Like, what's wrong with you? You're missing it. It's like, it's so obvious,
Yeah.
And I think it's that whole thing of like you get so caught up, I think, in your own drama, essentially. Like, it's an ego thing. If you're so close to it, or if it's not I don't mean ego thing in the I mean in a psychological way. It's that part of you that's either insecure or has an inflated view or is striving for something great.
It's between your id and your superego.
Yeah. So it's not the part, as you said, Tom. It's not the part that really knows, because when we take all the stuff away, there's parts of us that really do know the truth about stuff.
Strip away all the bull.
Yeah. But it's difficult, and especially if you are, you have a dream of becoming a something like an illustrator or a hand letter or a graphic designer or whatever, and you just realize, man, it's just not going to happen. It's not easy.
I think when I was just doing general design, didn't matter how many books I got or websites I looked at, I couldn't get out of my design being sort of mediocre, sort of run of the mill in the middle of the road. And I was like, I always want to, I want to work with brands or I want to work with agencies, and nothing ever really happened. It just felt like I was constantly trying, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
The ideas weren't there, the execution wasn't there. It was just okay, or that looks nice. It wasn't. There was always these other designers that were much, like, what, how did that idea come about? Why can't mine be as refined as that? However hard I try.
Yeah.
And it was just that constant feeling. I can't do it.
That's terrible.
And obviously for me, I found that lettering was something that actually, when I pushed them together, it worked. But that was only, I find it hard to see where, because with lettering you can learn, like calligraphy, you can learn it. I think everyone can learn it because it's a muscle memory thing and it's a craft. Like we've talked about driving a car, but then there's that learning it, and then there's taking it further.
Yep.
Adding where, because talent, also there's that quote about talent and hard work, and hard work can outperform talent if talent doesn't work. But I think talent is where it takes, you practice that craft to a certain level, and then I think talent then just takes it to another level.
Absolutely.
But we don't all have that, and I suppose. But it's not something you can see. Do you know what I mean? It's not obvious where.
And I also don't even think you can teach it necessarily.
Yeah. Well, talent isn't something you can teach. Talent is something that it's trying to work out and be self-aware of your gifts, what you've been naturally. Like something we were leading up to as we were getting ready for this was like a tall basketball player. That's something, being able to jump high and then being quite tall or very tall is not something you can just practice at. That's something you're given as you're born. Something, like Usain Bolt. His structure of his body means that he aligned his talent with his natural abilities, and in the practice of training in the running to become the fastest in the world. Not everyone, or hardly anyone, is going to be able to do that. And I think it's that sort of when the sort of collision of what you're naturally gifted at and what you choose to pursue work in unison together.
Yep.
And that doesn't have to be best in the world.
No, it doesn't have to be best in the world.
You to
but
a successful career, or
it's how you work out what you're naturally
good at.
Yeah. And I suppose that comes through trying.
And you're totally right. Talent alone isn't enough, right?
No, but I think talent comes into effect when you put the hard work in.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. What sprung to mind was there was a lad I went to school with who was a very, very good football player. Like he would have easily been county standard, probably beyond. And he ended up going to rehab instead. And like it was, like obviously not very nice, but when you see such a natural talent, almost didn't have to try, wouldn't go and practice like any of that, and he'd just show up and be like by far the best player every time, and just did nothing with it. And I'd say that's a more common tale than the people who really hone their talent.
And the hard thing is seeing someone who's naturally talented, and but they just have no passion for it.
Yeah,
it's just hard because there's people who are naturally talented and choose or are lazy and not. but who just
Which
like,
is
actually,
really hard.
it's not something I enjoy. And you're like, oh man, I would give everything to be able to do those two things. But I suppose that's it. You can't pursue it. If you're naturally talented someone you don't want to pursue it, then that's fair enough.
I guess it's saying there's not a level playing field, because as like on the show we've always been about just put in the work, practice, all of that still stands, but realize it really is not a level playing field. You will have advantages over other people with certain stuff and disadvantages with other stuff, and you got to be aware like talent is a real variable.
And it comes into this thing we ought to talk about, is like the comparison, is that you might be comparing yourself to someone who actually has a bit more natural talent in that area. You can still get to a similar level, but theirs might look more effortlessly, and it might be less effort for that other person, but you can still get there if you put in the hard work. And then there's areas where you have to be real with yourself, and actually it's taking too much effort and it's not producing, which is a really hard place to be in. And there's some things I've done in my life where I've been going through, and I've been trying and I've come to realize that it's just the effort I'm putting in is not getting you back.
It's really demoralizing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's demoralizing, but it does free you up to then, okay, I'm going to try something else now, because and it's hard because you really want, there's that passion for something that's just, I don't know, it's too hard, but just not going with who you are.
I don't know. I still maintain, if you have a strong passion for something, and it may not necessarily bear the fruits that you. Maybe I should backtrack in my thought. I think we all make the mistake of comparing well-known or famous people in our craft as the benchmark. Like if you're well-known, or if you become famous, or if you get these jobs, then you must be the best. And that is not the case at all. There could be way better people who have got less well-known jobs or clients or whatever, who are producing unbelievable work. And I think we make the mistake of kind of comparing success. Success has to be, well, they famous, or they well-known, or they, I don't know, have good clients or whatever. You can still have the passion, the drive, and still not be what you think is good as them, but still be good in your own right. It doesn't have to be, I don't know, I'm just trying to find the balance of the other side. If somebody's still really passionate about something, and they may not be as brilliant as the next, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci, it doesn't matter. It's
something that I've seen, not recently, but with the rise of the internet, is that how much a craft or whatever it may be is personality driven.
Exactly.
So to take, for instance, some of you may know the YouTube photographer, vlogger, Peter Mckennon. He may not be, and he probably isn't the best photographer or videographer in the world, but his personality is so likable that drives up his brand, his
appeal,
his success,
his success. And there might be someone who has the technical and the artistic abilities that just makes phenomenal photographs, and you see them and you just think that is a beautiful photograph. But in terms of them trying to elevate their brand, it's really hard work, because they may struggle with being on camera, or struggle with
and they're really unlikable and slightly racist as well, and so they're not getting anywhere in life.
No, but that's exactly what I meant. It's like, just because you're not necessarily as well known as the next person doesn't mean that you're not as good, because I think that's where we make the mistake of judging. And also, I think we also don't take into account other people's circumstances can help them so much better along their journey than your circumstance. Like maybe you've got financial issues, or the place that you live in, you don't have access to computers, or whatever. There's so many outside factors that can actually also prevent you or slow you down in your development. So even though you're feeling that you're pushing uphill the whole time, but you see, this is where it gets tricky, because even though you're having these battles, but you're still achieving something from a creative point of view, I don't think you should give up.
No, I'm not. I'm just thinking of, like, when you're, I don't know, when you're putting in a lot of effort, because it's sometimes you're putting in. I've put in stuff that's been hard work.
Yeah.
And I've got there, and I was like, it was worth the journey. And sometimes I've got there, and it's not been worth that journey.
Yes.
And so it's trying to
balance.
Yeah, because like you say, if you enjoy, the thing that's hard is social media has made art harder to enjoy in terms of personal art, because you put it out there, no one likes it, you think, well, what's wrong with it? Whereas like it used to be the case, you just make art because you love art.
Yeah.
And so you're in this sort of place where it's harder to just enjoy what you like doing, because, or you could do, I could do stuff that's just for me in this studio that never shows any light of day, and I'd probably be quite content on that pieces I make. But as soon as it goes onto the internet, it then has this. It's like on a balance where it could go. If everyone likes it, then I'm like, well, this must be a fantastic piece of art. If no one likes it, I'm like, well, I really failed there, and I won't do that again. But I think it's hard sometimes because of that, it's hard to enjoy it as much as sometimes. Yeah. It's sort of like you do enjoy it, and then sometimes you don't really enjoy it. And I think it's more of a roller coaster ride of emotions in terms of when you're doing your art.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And it also makes sense to then, along with the self-awareness, is analyze the intention behind it. So if your intention is to get likes on Instagram or whatever,
you ain't going to be very happy.
No, it's gonna backfire. But if your intention is to create something for the joy of it, because the time you spent doing it just felt unbelievably amazing, then it doesn't matter what other people think, because you just
I've got a quote.
Your own quote?
Like your own quote?
No.
Oh.
Someone else's. All
Thank
right.
goodness for that.
I've come.
We've had
mused.
I did one of your quotes the other day, so I was expecting another one today.
I know, it was great. I'll try and make something up before the end of the episode, because I did enjoy that. I've never had my quote lettered, so appreciate that. It was an honour. Do you guys know Ira Glass?
No.
Context? I might do.
I actually don't know that much about him. I believe he was involved in radio and that kind of thing, but he's written a lot of books. I'm sure all the Ira Glass fans out there are now cringing at that horrendous description. But
lack of knowledge of all of us.
Bad lack of knowledge. But I do. I know him specifically for this quote. That's how I kind of discovered him. And it's a little bit long, but it's very apt. And he talks about the gap, basically, for creatives. And he says,
I think I've heard this.
Nobody tells this to people who are beginners. I wish somebody told me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But there is this gap. For the first couple of years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase. They quit. Most people I know who do interesting creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have this special thing that we all want it to have. We all go through this. And if you are just starting out or you're still in this phase, you've got to know that it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is a lot of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week you will finish one story but in our case, design, art, whatever. It's only by going through a volume of work that you will close that gap and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And I took longer to figure out how to do this than anyone I've ever met. It's going to take a while. It's normal to take a while. You've just got to fight your way through it.
Oh, well said.
Which is a very good quote. So
That is
Ian,
really
It sums
great.
it up, doesn't it?
if you want to credit that to me, please, that would be great. The Tom Ross quote. And I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would kind of add on to it that I think when people do get good, like I said earlier, we still have these self-deprecating, insecure moments of like, oh no, I'm not that good, imposter syndrome, all the rest of it. I would argue that is not because we don't realize how good we are currently. It's because we are aspiring to be something unrealistic, or it's comparison syndrome. So, for example, let's say you close the gap he's talking about, you practice, you actually get pretty damn good. But you're saying, well, I'm not happy because I'm not as good as Leonardo da Vinci.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to be happy, right?
No.
And I think that's kind of why, like, at first you're unhappy because of the gap, because you have taste as a creative. So you're like, yeah, my work actually sucks, and I recognize that. Whereas Joe Blogs in the street would be like, oh, it all looks okay to me, right? They wouldn't have the taste. So the taste and the gap makes you unhappy at first. But even when you get there, a lot of creatives are still not self-aware and still unhappy because they're comparing themselves to unrealistic expectations.
Which I think is a real shame, because I think then you miss out the joy of that achievement of reaching that point where your work is starting to align with your vision. And I mean, for me, I would say I'm closer to that than I've obviously ever been in my life, because, you know, in the last couple of years, I've spent so much time drawing. I know I've still got a long way to go, but besides all of that, I still feel it's the most joy I've ever felt when creating that I ever have in my life, because I'm starting to translate whatever's in my mind onto paper, and that is quite a thing, you know. I mean, it's, for me, it's like it's quite a thing, but and I think, but that doesn't stop me personally from wanting to better my skill. I mean, I know I lack skill, and that's fine. But yes, as you said, Tom, I think it's a crying shame if you can't even realize you've managed to at least get to that point where you should be celebrating.
It's crazy, right? Like,
it is crazy.
I don't know if you've ever had a Fitbit or anything like that tracks your step count or the distance that you move. It would be like saying a realistic target for someone who's a great runner might be 1,000 miles or something, 10,000 miles, let's say. And so that would be a realistic target where every day you get closer and you close that gap. You close that gap by practicing, by putting in the work. And you feel good, because the bigger the gap, the more disconnect and the more unhappiness. So the more you run, the closer you get to your 10,000 miles, the gap gets smaller, your, depression kind of shrinks, your happiness starts to go up until you kind of reach that point of fulfillment. But what people are doing is they're setting a target of 10 million miles, which they're never going to reach if they ran every minute of their life. And so the gap is so vast that the bigger gap is going to lead to greater unhappiness, and you're never going to get there. And any progress you make on the timeline of 10 million miles will look like a speck and have no impact. So the whole thing's ridiculous. So the key is actually start with realistic expectations. Everyone's so focused on the work. Got to be practicing, got to be working. That's the way I'm going to get better. That's how I'm going to get happy. It's all completely wasted effort if you don't start with an actual realistic goal in mind of, I want my work to be roughly that decent. And that's not, that's not crazy.
It's so true. You've actually just reminded me, gosh, I haven't thought about this in years. When I was much, much younger, before I think I was just hit high school, I always had this dream to be a Disney animator. But
That's cool.
Yeah, but it was like the most far-fetched dream you could ever think of. It was like, I don't know, it just wasn't possible for a whole bunch of reasons. And it's exactly what you just said. I'd made 1 million miles was my goal. So because I made the 1 million miles my goal, I kind of gave up. I just didn't think. I didn't think illustration at all was a career then.
Yeah.
You know, then I just didn't even pursue that because it was so unattainable, which is ludicrous.
Of course it is. Like, why not aim for, if we're sticking with the running metaphor, why not aim for 10,000 miles? And you can always set new goals. So when you smash through that, have a big celebration and then aim for 20,000.
I mean, I kick myself literally almost every day. I guess, but it's a bit better. But it was really bad at one point. That why did I do that? Because I could have started this drawing career much sooner. Instead, I didn't think it was possible, and I went through the whole other process of figuring out other stuff, and then only in my 40s did I realize, okay, hang on, I can actually make it work. And it's so stupid because I could have actually started it.
But it becomes all or nothing, right?
I know. I don't know. It's crazy.
Here's the thing: is there anything that you've learned in your life that surprised you that you actually learned it? Do you know what I mean? In terms of like, from the get-go of you trying to learn it, you thought, this is just I'm going to try it. It's out my comfort zone. It's not something I naturally do.
Guitar.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
When did you start learning?
Quite late, when I was like 18 or something, because I got fed up. Like, a lot of my friends were musicians. I got sick of like them sitting around playing, and I was like, I just have to sit and listen. I can't do this. And my whole family are like inept when it comes to music, not naturally talented. I'm the same. So I picked it up really slowly. That was like the thing we said, like pushing a boulder up a hill. Just didn't get it. I had to like practice harder than they did. Didn't come as naturally. I'm still, in the scheme of things, probably quite average, but now I love being able to pick up an instrument, have a little play on it, and that's fine, because I never, aspired to be Jimi Hendrix. For me, it went beyond my expectations because I had no expectations. My expectation was like, learn one song on guitar. And now I've like, written and recorded crappy songs and like gigged locally a bunch and been in a band. And that was like more than enough for me. And that was amazing. But the whole point is it exceeded my expectations because I set realistic ones.
Precisely. And you, Ian, have you ever done that? I'm trying to think if I ever have learned something that I didn't think I ever would be able to.
Dance, or were you like, nah, I got this from
childhood? You talking to me, or at least?
No, because I started dancing at the age of like 6 or 7. So no, you don't really think of anything back then. You just want to wear a pink leotard.
Tight fate. Oh.
Sorry, Ian, go on.
Making a typeface. I spent the whole of because I remember being
that's a good one.
Being in my first job, and just the sheer amount of typefaces and just all the characters and all that, and I was just like, man, these people must be on a whole nother level.
Yeah,
and they still are in terms of the quality of because I find there's a difference between the ones who spend 2 years designing a typeface and like me, who doesn't spend that long. But it was the one thing where I was like, I sat there using them. I just thought I'd be a user rather than a creator of them.
Yes.
And actually, and actually making one was just like, never part of my, this is something I'm going to learn. It wasn't something on my list of, I really could do with learning this. It was just something that happened. It was just from a follower badgering me to make a typeface that my first one came around. I thought, I'll do some more. And that is something that can be learned. And then the talent comes in how you apply it to make it different, I suppose. And like, for me, like, attention to detail, I can do up to a certain point, and I just literally can't focus on it. Whereas some people can just sit there, and this is why there's people who can spend 2 years on it. And I've come to realize I can't do massive projects. And that's my self-awareness coming in, because I would try and do big projects and wonder why I can't get my enthusiasm to keep going.
Yep.
And I come to realize that actually I'm a short project, quick. I can work quickly in a small space of time and get things done rather than spread it over a long period of time. And learning about that myself has really revolutionized how I work, because I know when projects are going to suit me and work well, and projects, if someone comes with this big project and there's tons and tons of work to do, I just know that I won't be able to keep going through it. But if it's a short,
that's awesome,
just need.
though.
Sorry?
That's awesome, though, to have that self-awareness, because it must make your life so much easier and so much less friction.
Yeah. And actually my wife brought to attention that I have this tendency to get obsessive over something for a short period of time and then move on to something else. Which luckily,
she's doing something right, clearly.
Yeah.
You've been together a good while now. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But that might be a particular style, and that's how I got obsessive over calligraphy for like 6 months solid. Not that I lost thing, but I was able to do that obsessiveness every single day without fail. Really set me up for I kept practicing off that, but it was like every single day without, even if we got home late that night, I would do that letter I was on.
Yeah.
And I know that I continue to do that, as in terms of I might have a particular style I like for a while, and then I have to move on to something else. And knowing that about me helps me to know that when I've got to the end of that and I need to move on, rather than trying to keep pushing into what feels.
Because your work suffers then,
and you're just trying to get. There's no enjoyment and there's no delight in your work, and in the finished result shows that.
Yeah.
So knowing, I think that actually helps your creativity, knowing how you work on, rather than looking at the creativity itself, looking at how you work with creativity in terms.
And you actually, this could also be another angle in terms of, people might mistake that the fact that they haven't figured that out about themselves as like they don't have a passion for a particular thing. In other words, they haven't quite figured out how to work around their own quirks and their personality traits and their whatever style to make their passion fit into them. I think sometimes they might force the way the world thinks that you should be working at a particular passion, and then it ends up being a flop because you lose your steam.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. It's a good thing to learn how you work best. I think a lot of us only realize that a bit too late, though. I mean, I also only learned that much later about myself.
Yeah, I found that I don't know whether it's a thing that happens with lots of people, but I found that in my 30s was when I really suddenly I do this because I do this, and I have this tendency and I have that tendency to do things.
I think it's quite common. I think it's very rare for teenagers, even more rare for children. 20s, you're kind of figuring stuff out, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Everyone, I've just entered my 30s and I feel like I'm off on that footing of a bit of a journey of self-awareness, much more so than when I was going into my 20s, and everyone I talk to defines their 30s as exactly that.
And I think that's why, some of these the entrepreneurs and people talking about business talk about like closing your eyes for your 20s, or for your teenagers until you're 30, because you need that time to experience life and find out what makes you tick and who you are.
Definitely.
And trying out, you've got that time to try out different projects, try out different styles, try out different crafts, because it doesn't matter if you spend a year on it and it fails, because you can spend another 9 years doing other bits and bobs. And I suppose, obviously the later you get on in life, the time you still have time, but you have less of it. I think you just need to make the most of that time when you're, especially in your 20s, between 20 and 30, of just figuring out where you fit in the world and fit in with work and stuff like that. And even into the mid 30s. So probably mid 30s until it actually started to click.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's why at the same time I picked up calligraphy. I think I then learned, I go, well, why didn't I learn this when I was younger? But then I didn't, you get those, some people who just draw, I started drawing as I came out the womb. And I'm like, I drew a little bit when I was a kid, but I stopped, I didn't really do any arty things until I got into sort of late school age and found that was the thing that was definitely, when I was looking at careers, I looked at what subjects did I enjoy and I was too good at, and art was by far the top. There was nothing else that I was like I enjoy and I'm good at. There was either something I was good at, which was maths, but I didn't enjoy it, so that was like wiped out. Then there was just nothing else, and so I was like, well, that's obviously got to be art. But then that's quite a broad spectrum. And then you have to go into nailing that down into, even graphic design is like a niche of art. And then you have to nail that down as well. But that took me 15 years. I don't know, however long.
It takes forever.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, there's no set right time.
No.
Like Ian says, some people draw their way out the womb. Ian started finding clarity when he was late in school. Lisa got into it in her 40s, which is ridiculous because she doesn't look 40. But it doesn't matter. Like, you've got your different moments in life.
He didn't say that I don't look 40.
Hold on, are you 40 yet?
January. We'll have to have a special episode.
Is January coming up?
Yeah. End of January.
Wow.
January 27th. If anyone wants to buy me a present.
Damn,
it's
the
your big 4-0.
yeah.
Woo!
But the thing is,
let's celebrate on the
I don't
podcast.
fear my age, because every year I find like it's like this, like I have another me, and like every year goes by and go, oh, you do that way because that's the way you're made, and I'm like, oh, that makes it easier to understand everything. Do you want to know what I mean?
For everyone listening to the podcast, Ian's sort of gesturing to a space next to him. He hasn't gone schizophrenic in his age. Yes, I know what you mean though.
Sort of like, I feel more comfortable in my skin. I'd never felt confident in terms of what I looked like. I had no sense of style.
And now you've got that lustrous beard and that slick haircut. You're good looking.
I'm very much the fact that I've grown into my body, is in terms of like,
yeah. I know exactly what you mean. For 90% of my life, I had the anatomical proportions of a lollipop, I think. There's like, you look at some, like, maybe some celebrities, and they just like, actually did so much better like 50 than you did when you were like 30. And I feel that I work better now I've got a beard. And, so for all the listeners at home, I think probably a closing note on how to know if you suck is to realise that Ian Barnard is like a fine wine. And if you get down on your work, go and sort of check in with his social media, because it is like handsomeness on a sharp incline with exponential results. So stop back in a decade. You're talking some George Clooney level.
Oh yeah, imagine that.
Little salt and pepper going on.
Yeah.
For you.
I've already started that. It's already coming.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
that's good luck, that.
You're lucky. You're lucky you still have your hair.
Yeah. That's the thing I've got, like, yeah, because there's some people who could have left school and then straight away they sort of started balding.
Straight back.
I seem to have quite a lot of hair.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very blessed in that area. So
how did we spiral to discussing our? Sorry, everyone.
Shall we? Self-awareness. We're unaware that we go off on random tangents at points.
Yeah.
But there you go. We're human. Shall we end on a knowledge bomb?
I'm waiting for your quote to come out, Tom.
Me
you
too.
said, "Oh, by the way,
I'm quite excited."
Well, do you two want to go first, and then I'm gonna try and whip something up in the kitchen quickly?
Self-aware.
So, advice on self-awareness, how to know if you're any good.
Well, I think going back to the quote that you mentioned by Ira Glass, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's that whole thing of, you got to give yourself a bit of a break. If you trust your instincts, trust the fact that you have good taste, and yes, initially it's not, you're not gonna match that taste with your work that you're putting out. But we're going back to what we always say: if you put in the graft, if you put in all the hours and the hard work, and just at it for years and years. I know it sounds daunting because it sounds like you're never going to get anywhere for years, but along the way you're gonna learn, you're gonna grow, you're gonna do projects, and that's not gonna not happen. It's just that only when you've sort of been at it for some time do you start feeling more comfortable, and maybe the uphill battle isn't so difficult. But at the same time, if you're not feeling joy ever and everything's an uphill battle, then you have to get realistic with yourself and realize that it may not be the thing for you.
Damn, that's good. Ian,
Heavy.
should we just end it there?
Yeah.
Can we top that? There's your quote. So I'm not sure exactly how many words and syllables that was, Lisa, but
It might take me a
you can
while
let
to let it out.
Yeah, hire a scribe to come in for the night and get that down for you.
Reams and reams in that one. I think for me, it's like, get to know yourself, get to love yourself,
Yeah.
and be comfortable in your own skin. Because that way you will learn what your skill set is. You'll learn what the way that you react to things is actually your way of working, and that sometimes where you get frustrated is actually you need to change. You need to look at what you're doing in a new light, whether that is because actually this is not something that you're the two that it's not naturally the thing that you're going to gel with, and it's being able to spend some time on that and wrestling with that, because sometimes you have to let that go, and sometimes it is a matter of time and it will produce some fruit. And just being, I think the more you can know yourself and how you work, the better your creativity and your work will be.
Amen. And I'm just going to end on, creativity doesn't have to be an uphill battle.
Ah. There it is.
These are getting increasingly ridiculous, trying to sort of fake profoundness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just remember, look inside, believe, and create.
I feel like a song's coming soon. Like you can break out in song.
There's like going to be a key. There's going to be a key change. He's going to stand up.
Well, ironically, I've got the self-awareness to realise that I sound like a bag of cats being strangled when I sing, and I wouldn't let the listeners endure that. So I hope you found this episode helpful on self-awareness. I'm sure no one listening does suck. We were just going for that sort of clickbait title, to be perfectly honest with you. Drag you in with that emotive start. But really, it's not about whether you suck or not. It's about self-awareness. It's about realistic expectations. It's about being happy in what you do. It's about enjoying the process, setting, fun goals, and not freaking yourself out talking about the gap.
Yep.
So, on that note, we'll see you next week.
Hopefully with Dustin.
Yeah, with Dustin. And boy, he better be self-aware.
Or giving in a note of leave.
That's what I mean. He better be self-aware in his contrition. Yeah, we'll see you guys next week.
Oh, yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope that it got you thinking more about your natural talents and how to focus on progressing them. As always, you can find full show notes over at honestdesigners.com or find us over on iTunes and now Spotify by searching for The Honest Designers Show. And remember, we're now on social media too, if you search for Honest Designers. If today's episode helped you, then it would mean the world to us if you took just a moment to leave us a quick review over on iTunes, as this is one of the best ways for other designers to discover the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week right here on The Honest Designers Show.